Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I experienced something in the mid-'80s, something that I did not know what it was until 20 years later when I saw Jeepers Creepers. And that's how I can explain what creature I saw. I was driving from work, taking a country road. I worked evenings, late nights. I saw an object above the ground but in the roadway on a country road coming towards me. I thought maybe an owl or something was going over the road and I better slow down. Then it appeared and it looked like the creature. Then it disappeared and I thought, nah, but then it turned totally black. Then all of a sudden, underneath my car there was like a thump, thump, thump. I thought I ran over something. I looked back. I looked to the right and to the left. In my mirrors, the sides, turned my head. I had a station wagon. Anyway, all of a sudden, I see these arms, a hand and a wing, then the face. And the eyes were an orange color but they were human-like too, but very large. The nose, it looked human but the skin, you could see the veins on the wing, it's leathery. It was like if you held your ear up to a light, you could kinda see right through it a little bit. It was like that. It then crawled on the top and it came over in front of the windshield a bit with its arms and wing flapping here and there. The next thing I know I heard thump, 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 thump. It was now on its backside on the ground and I'm still moving. I was wondering, would it stand up? Is it okay? It's my character, I don't want to hit and run anything. I'm debating that and I slowed down for some reason. It got up, it turned and looked at me. It was like crippled, struggling to stretch and everything. After a while it got stretched out. It turned towards the field that had wood railing, pasture-like with a tree line and moon in the background. It flew but it hit the ground again because it was wobbling, but it got up and it flew again. Then it disappeared. To this day I'm still kind of shaken about it. I never knew until I saw that movie. Then just 2 months ago I looked it up on the internet. About the movie, about the creature, and it still doesn't make sense. Jeepers Creepers. I thought, did they see this thing before they made the movie? This was in Oregon outside of Amity. I lived way up in Molalla and I traveled through a lot of counties to get to my job. I had moved. I was driving at night. Honest thing was, the moon showed at certain times and it was almost like it brightened up and I saw him. I was on the driver's side. I was terrified. This is only the second time I have told this story. It took me 2 to 3 weeks or more to go back to that road.
I am from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and approximately 2 years ago to this day my daughter and I were riding our bikes. It was bright that night due to a full moon. Not many clouds in the sky but a few that would once in a while make the night darker. We stopped by a friend's house. Her and her 2 daughters came out and we were all just talking. I happened to look up in the sky and there's this flying long human-shaped thing with a wingspan approximately 7 to 8 feet wide. It reminded me of the movie Jeepers Creepers. My mouth just kind of opened and I was speechless and pointing as it went behind the cloud near the moon. I told them what I had just witnessed. Everyone kind of giggled and I told them it did not come out of the cloud yet to keep looking. Well, to our eyes it appeared again. My daughter just stood there watching it, repeating herself, "Mom, what is that?" I know she had that same hard-to-swallow feeling I did, while my friend's 2 girls ran inside screaming. We watched as it flapped and soared near the moon till it disappeared into the clouds again and never came out. I know what I had seen that night, but wouldn't know what to call it except a flying human-like creature. An experience I would never take back, and when I hear others, I really want to believe they have seen the same thing I had. My daughter to this day feels there is so much out there we really don't know much about.
15 years ago, I was in the 4th grade. I was just starting to get into science-type stuff such as homemade science experiments, studying the planets, etc. One day out of the blue, my parents surprised me with a telescope so I can get a better look at the moon. Believe me when I say I was as excited as ever. They helped me set it up and I couldn't run outside any faster. It's pretty dark and the full moon is as bright as day. I spend several minutes trying to adjust it to the correct position and trying to get a crisp image of the moon. Once I finally got everything set up correctly, I was in awe. The moon was so clear and crisp through my telescope I felt as if it was within my grasp. I literally spent minutes simply staring at it through my telescope in wonder. All of a sudden, as I'm still looking through the telescope, I see something black go across and block the line of sight to the moon. Naturally, I look confused. The next moment always gives me chills. I saw, well, the closest reference I can give is what looked like a shadow in the sky in the shape of a winged humanoid. similar to Jeepers Creepers. The only way I can explain to people. I lived in a neighborhood behind some croplands and had a 2-story house at the time, so it had to be at least 50 to 60 feet in the air. It was circling the sky slowly perpendicular to my house like a vulture waiting for its prey to die. Until this day, that is the only time in my life when I physically couldn't move out of fear, shock. After about 30 seconds of not being able to move and still seeing this thing circling, I managed to snap myself out of the trance I was in and quickly ran inside like my life depended on it. Of course, I told my parents what happened and they naturally didn't believe me. Again, like I'm pretty sure a lot of people have said, you've been watching too much Jeepers Creepers. Disappointed, I convinced myself my parents were right. It was all in my head. So the next morning I head to the bus stop for school and have the typical conversations with my friends. There's 4 of us waiting at the bus stop talking, and I can see our last friend making his way over, crossing the street to wait with us. I'm looking in the direction the bus is supposed to be coming and it's nowhere in sight. Then I hear from behind me, from the last friend.
Guys, you'll never believe what I saw last night.
What?
Jeepers Creepers.
The movie?
No, he was flying above my house.
My other friends started saying he was lying. There's no way, he's funny, etc. I slowly turned back towards him and asked if it was around so-and-so time. The time I saw it, and he said yes. He asked how I knew. I told him I saw it 10 minutes prior to him. We had never talked about it before that moment because we didn't have phones. Cell phones were barely a thing, and he only lived at the end of the street from me. Naturally, we spent the whole bus ride talking about what we saw and felt. It was a huge relief to hear that what I saw wasn't all in my head. My friend was able to witness this on a separate occasion, literally minutes apart. But what was a relief also turned into fear because I know I saw something out there.
A few years back, 2011 or so, I was living in the Bronx. My mom and I were outside having yarns and laughs. She heard this strange noise, what sounded like an aircraft or flying object cutting through the air. At first I thought she was joking until I heard it. She was like, "Look, it looks like a bat." I was like, "That's too big to be a bat." Then she was like, "Well, it must be the weather balloon." She then walks back in the house strangely, so I sat at the back waiting for her to come out. She came back with coffee when I heard something cutting through the treetops. Whatever it was had landed in my neighbor's tree. It had been cut back a lot, but had enough leaves covering it. It had a big thump to it when it landed. Mom ran inside when she heard it. I was freaking out, but couldn't help but stare. As I walked to the fence, I noticed that there was no wind whatsoever. As I was trying to get a better look, a big deep breath blew into my face. I was startled, stood back and said, "If you're friendly, show your face now, but if not, just leave please." As I was stepping back, I saw it. Shocked like a stunned mullet, this big wind roared up and with a huge thump, it flew into midair. Damn, that thing looked like a big tall man. Big built solid body, 7 to 8 feet, and it looked like it had wings like a bat. Shocked, I ran into the house and went directly to my room, laid down thinking about what I witnessed. The next morning, Mom left to go to work, so I decided to rake the backyard. Then my neighbor yelled.
"Hey sis, what happened to you last night? You're lucky it didn't take you."
He yelled about an old folk tale, that there was a man with wings like a bat, that used to come around every now and then take women back to where he lived and make them his wives. The way he described it was what I saw. Still to this day I don't know for sure what or who this thing was.
This took place during the summer of 2010 in northern Illinois, not far from Rockford. My friend and I were just riding around in my car. As the day continued, we decided to head out towards the country backroads. We were both 17, and this was the summer before our senior year in high school. We had been riding around for several hours at night, and around 10 p.m. we were on a gravel road I wasn't familiar with. It was a location that had lots of farmland all around and a few houses here and there. We were talking while I'm speeding along this gravel road. There was no drinking or drugs involved. The corn on both sides of the road was high. I looked ahead and noticed that the road was about to dip, so I slowed back. As I approached the dip, I could see the corn shaking to the right of me as the headlight hit it. We both stopped talking as we watched the corn. I thought it was probably a deer about to sprint out onto the road, so I slowed down to a crawl. The corn was now shaking violently. We're staring at the corn waiting for the deer to jump out. Then all of a sudden, the corn literally parts open just to the right of us. This thing steps out. It was the size of a large man and all black. As it walked out of the corn, it was well illuminated by my headlights. It leaped and opened these huge sets of wings, and instantly went airborne. It quickly flew right in front of my car and swooped up into the air as it reached the other side of the road. I didn't see any facial features, but the wings were very wide and looked like that of a giant bat. I floored the gas pedal. My friend was yelling to get out of there. I drove as fast as I could, trying to maintain control on the gravel surface. We drove for a good 5 minutes before saying a word. The whole time we're looking around us, hoping that thing wasn't chasing us. We began to calm down and soon ended up on a road I knew. As I thought about it, that thing looked like it was covered in shiny black tar. It had a weird sheen to it. The fact that it accelerated into flight so quickly had me stumped. My friend and I talked about it through our entire senior year and never did have a clue as to what we saw. We referred to it as the Flying Tar Man. We didn't dare tell anyone else at school. I recently told my wife about it, but she's a skeptic and doesn't believe in the supernatural.
Back in 2013, my friend Brad lived in rural South Dakota and I would go see him any time of the day or night. It was late and I was headed to his place, no traffic on the highway and just had the light of my headlights to see. I came upon a curve and up ahead was something black crouched over in the middle of the road, like it was looking at something or maybe eating it. I like to drive fast and love animals and didn't want to hurt whatever it was, so I hit my brakes to slow down. When all of a sudden this thing spread out its wings, which looked like a black cape, I think, it all happened so fast, and I thought it would have lifted up and away, when it took off backwards towards my car and it hit the top center of my windshield. It was so hard I ducked and instantly looked in the rearview mirror to see if it was still alive. It was way too dark to see, plus there was a row of bushes. I knew it had to have smashed my windshield. I couldn't tell how bad, but I could see this glitter splatter, so I just kept driving to my friend's place, which was about another 10 minutes away. When I pulled up and he came out to greet me, I was so shook up by what I just hit and was telling him the story and how we had to take his truck and go see if it was still alive. He kept telling me to wait for morning, but I wouldn't stop begging him. He finally agreed to ease my mind and we started to walk to his truck and stopped to look at my windshield. The windshield was not cracked at all, but the splatter it left behind was a huge gray glitter splatter and felt all silky and soft, like when you kill a moth, only bigger, way bigger. We got in the truck and drove to where I had hit it, and nothing was in the road or ditches. I felt better about not seeing anything still alive and suffering, but was baffled at what just happened and the glitter splatter. About a week later, my friend died of a massive heart attack. This happened in 2013 and I moved away for a couple years and now I'm back home. I haven't told a lot of people my story. I did research on Mothman and it makes me wonder. It happened so fast and I'm very observant and it kind of reminded me of the creeper or a gargoyle, all crouched in the road eating something.
I lived about an hour outside of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and while on my way to my now wife's home to visit as the sun was just going down, my best friend at the time was driving as we were all going to hang out. I was listening to music and looking out the passenger side window, just enjoying the woodlands as I like to do often. As we approached an opening on the side of the road for the power line towers, I saw a lanky humanoid-looking creature with huge black wings flying up into the clearing. The event shocked both myself and my best friend at the time, who was driving so much that we decided to turn around and try to get an even better look at it. By the time we had returned to that spot, however, there was no sight of it. He and I have never really spoken about this with anyone for fear of ridicule, but the instant I saw this on your site, I felt I needed to give that mother and daughter a peace of mind. They aren't crazy, and I know what I have seen. I have lived in the woods of New Jersey almost my entire life, and have seen almost all of the natural wildlife that occurs within it, and this was not one of them. The location was on Landis Avenue in Buena Vista Township, New Jersey. The sun was just going down, so there was still some light shining down in this area. Very bizarre creature, whatever it was.
I don't remember the exact year, but this would have been the mid-80s. My best guess is 1985 or 1986. It was a summer evening in Oak Hill, West Virginia. Oak Hill is a small town in the south-central part of the state, about 15 minutes from Beckley, West Virginia, or about 1 hour from Charleston, West Virginia. I was between 7 or 8 years old at the time, and I was outside playing with my brother and our neighbor, a boy named Roy who was the same age as my brother, give or take a few months. We lived in a very rural area which, at that time, we probably had 3 or 4 neighbors within a 1-mile radius, and we effectively lived on the edge of the woods down a dirt road, probably half a mile from a real road. So there weren't many people around. It was dusk and we were throwing rocks to bats. Today, it seems strange, but back then it was something kids in the area did. Bats are common in the area, and around dusk in the summer they are out in force to catch bugs. You'll see dozens of them, and they usually fly approximately 40 feet off the ground or less. If you throw a small rock high in the air, you can often get the bat to swoop down and catch your rock, presumably thinking it's a bug. It's interesting the things kids did before there was the internet, and we only had ABC and PBS on the TV back then, so this was entertainment at its finest. At any rate, we're throwing rocks to bats when we see what we at first thought was a monstrous bat flying higher in the sky than the others. I don't remember who spotted it first, but once it was pointed out, we were stunned. After staring at it for a few seconds, it was clear that this wasn't a bat. It was something else. It was a creature in the shape of a man, but with wings. It had wings exactly like that of a bat, but it had distinct arms and legs also. It was mostly gliding, with only the occasional flap of its wings, which is unlike a bat, which constantly flaps its wings, and its arms were sort of lazily hanging behind it at its side. It looked tall, but lanky, but it was too high in the sky to really get a good estimate of size. I know today that it's pretty easy to get size estimates really wrong on objects that are flying, like large birds. I also can say that it was dark, but I couldn't tell you anything about coloration. It was dusk and the light was relatively low by that point, and we were seeing it mostly as a silhouette. We saw a head, but never a face. I don't think it was looking down. My best estimate is that it was about 2 to 2.5 times as high as the bats, so that would probably put it at around 100 feet off the ground, but I could easily be way off. It wasn't a detail that I focused on at the time. We watched this creature for a little while, maybe 15 seconds or so. We were transfixed, standing there with slack jaws, trying to comprehend what we were seeing. Then we snapped out of it, we looked at each other, and simultaneously we ran toward the house to get my dad. I remember my dad was home, but my mom wasn't. We ran inside and told him to come outside quickly. We told him that we had seen the devil. Of course, we thought it was the devil. That's how we would have contextualized it within our very limited framework at the time. He told us that he was sure that we hadn't seen the devil, but he reluctantly decided to come outside and check. By the time he did, whatever it was had gone. He reassured us with some platitudes, but he obviously didn't believe us. We were all pretty shaken by the sighting, and we talked about it for weeks afterwards. I slept in the bed with my parents that night, and for at least a week afterwards. This incident actually spurred my interest in the supernatural. Later, as a teenager, I learned about the Mothman sightings and wondered if that had been what we had witnessed. With the West Virginia connection, it was natural to think it may have been. But the descriptions never really fit perfectly, and we weren't very close to Point Pleasant. It wasn't until I read other people's reports that it became clear that others had been seeing exactly what I had seen. The Jeepers Creepers description really is the most fitting description that I've seen. I have trouble reconciling what we saw with reality as I know it, but I am sure that we saw something. Not really much to tell beyond that. My brother passed away many years ago, and I haven't spoken to Roy in probably as long. He's had some struggles with substance abuse as an adult, and I've kept my distance. None of us discussed the incident since we were adults, though we did discuss it at some point in our teens. I wanted to share just to give you an additional data point in your investigation. I expect that we'll never really know what people are seeing, but it's good that someone is documenting it, for posterity, if for nothing else.
I had never seen anything supernatural or alien in my life until last summer. I had always been and still am very much a skeptic, and to this day I try to convince myself that what I saw was actually a really big hawk or something, but I know I'm lying to myself. It was around 3:45 a.m., I'm driving west on 322 towards Chesterland, Ohio. I'm driving a Freightliner box truck with a load of newspapers. In the summertime at night, there's always a layer of fog hanging down around the ground, and the moon was bright and the stars were out. Going about 50 miles per hour through the hills, I see this dark figure in the moonlight that was coming right at me. It looked huge, so I slammed the brakes and actually ducked down instinctively because I was driving right towards it at windshield level. I heard a big thud as the figure had gone over the cab and smacked right into the flat aluminum box right behind the cab at probably 40 miles per hour. I kept my foot on the brake and came to a stop on the side of the road, probably about 75 yards from where the impact happened. Wondering if it had smashed in the top of the box and thinking maybe I could see what it was I hit, I got out and looked around. The box wasn't smashed in, so I walked around to the back of the truck, and that's when I saw it in the moonlight almost as clear as day. This thing was huge. I thought for sure it was dead, but all of a sudden it rolled over, and that's when I saw its bat-like wings, not bird-shaped. It rolled over and stood up on two legs and was at least 6 feet tall. The thing looked right at me with its red/orange eyes, and I was literally frozen in fear. I could not move at all. Then it spread its huge wings out, jumped up and flew off. I ran back to the truck and took off towards Chesterland as fast as I could and spent the rest of the night on edge trying to rationalize what I had just seen. I wasn't that close to it, so I could see facial features and much detail. Just the 6-foot-tall bat-winged man with orange-red eyes. I do that route for work every week, and every time I go through that stretch on 322 I get uneasy. It freaks me out almost 6 months later.
It was back in the late summer of 2000, around this time of the year. There's a park/dam in a town by the name of Goshen, Indiana that people frequently visit during the day. A friend of mine lived right near the dam, and sometimes at night we would head over there and just hang out. One clear night we decided to take a walk to the dam since there was a full moon out and it was really bright out. So we figured, why not? So we walked to the dam, which was about a 5-minute walk. Once you get to the dam area, there's a long path along the top of the lake that you have to walk to get to the end where the dam starts at. We were walking like normal, just talking and looking at the sky when we approached the end area of the dam. There are some steps that go down to the bottom of the dam that's usually used by people who like to fish. Anyway, we hear this loud rumbling, like the rocks moving like crazy down below. We were like, what the heck is that noise? What's going on down there? All of a sudden we hear this whoosh. It was something similar to the whoosh you would hear from a pterodactyl in a Jurassic Park movie. That's the only way I can describe the sound. It flew right at the edge of the dam, but it was too dark to clearly see it. What we did see was the outline before it swooped in the moonlight. I remember feeling the intense rush of air from its flap. I've seen a lot of birds growing up in the country and traveling to all kinds of nature parks, and this was no ordinary bird. It had a scary similar resemblance to the creeper in mid-flight with its wings in the movie Jeepers Creepers. But that wasn't the scary part. Not more than 3 whooshes from its wings, we hear the brush behind us that leads to the woods moving around. Then we hear this loud bang. Someone was shooting at it. We bolted out of there as fast as we could, sprinting back towards the parking lot at the end of the dam, when we heard this loud crash on the opposite side of the lake where we think the creature landed. We got back to my friend's house and heard police sirens. We didn't go back out, but we went the next day to see what crashed on the opposite side. There were huge broken tree branches, but nothing else. A man was outside walking around the area, and he said he lives nearby and heard something that sounded like a plane crash in the trees. But there was no sign of anything but broken trees. My friend and I talk about that thing every time we see each other. His uncle witnessed something like that in 2002 in the South Bend area. But the real question is, who was shooting at it? That's what bugged me the most all these years. We joked that it was Van Helsing, lol. But yeah, when I hear stories like it really makes you think of all the other things that are there.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.